Okay, so hey there, everybody. Andrew
Okay.
King here. I'm the publisher of Canadian Musician, and you're joining us for another free NWC webinar presentation coming at you courtesy of Norris Whitney Communications and Canadian Musician. Joining me momentarily, we have Vincent Degiorgio here to help us demystify music publishing. He's the president of Cymba Music Publishing. Do a little bit more of an intro shortly, but before we get started, just some general housekeeping. First off, to everyone joining us, and those that aren't, but a full session, a recording of our session tonight will be made available at nwcwebinars.com about 24 hours after tonight's webinar wraps up. So for repeat viewings, or if you want to send this to any of your industry contacts, anything like that, you'll be able to do so. In a moment, I'm going to launch a poll, and actually, why don't we do it now while I'm talking? Essentially, we just want to gauge who's joining us this evening. It'll help us not only steer tonight's conversation, but again, we do a free webinar every month, and basically want to make sure that those are always being catered to the people that are joining us and the topics that are important to them. So I'll leave this open for a few seconds. Right now, it's looking like the slight majority of our attendees are performing or recording artists. We've got a healthy chunk of industry professionals, and actually, as we might expect, about a quarter are behind the scenes songwriters. So this will absolutely pertain to you. About halfway through this session, we'll have a short question period. We'll take a few, especially the questions that relate to something that Vince and I have touched on. If we don't get to your question at that point, rest assured we'll have a longer Q&A at the end of the session. And of course, I'll be able to answer a few of those during the session as well. And finally, yeah, at the end, we've got a few titles that we can recommend to you, both Vince and I actually, books that cover the subject of music publishing and will basically just help expand your understanding if you want to take advantage of that. There are also some handouts available. You'll be able to access a quick slide view of the presentation we're going to do. So if you want to print that off in the time being or just get the PDF to mark up digitally, it'll help you follow along while we're speaking here. And I think that's the end of our general housekeeping. So let's close this poll. We've had the majority of people vote, or if anyone else wants to, jump on it in the next 5 seconds. And I'll share the results just so you know the company you're keeping. Yeah, so here's a quick look. As I mentioned, oh yeah, as you might expect, shouts out to the few members of the media, my peers. Thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone for joining us. I think we're going to have a really great session here, so let's roll. Once again, I'm Andrew King, editor of Canadian Musician. This is Demystifying Music Publishing, and joining me is Vincent Degiorgio, the president of Cymba Music Publishing, currently serving as the president of the Canadian Music Publishers Association, so can't get much more direct to the source. He represents a stable of writers and composers here in Canada. Vincent himself is a songwriter and a very accomplished one, multi-million selling, and yeah, certainly an impressive pedigree. And let's roll into it. Vincent, thank you for letting me spout off for a little while. We really appreciate you joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, as we were talking about earlier, sometimes the hardest questions to answer are the easiest to read on paper. But yeah, in a nutshell, give us a quick breakdown. What is music publishing?
I wrote just a small paragraph of what my opinion of it is. And basically, publishing is the function of protecting and representing the creative works of a composer, a songwriter, and the rights they own or control. I affectionately call it the real estate of the music industry. And, we acquire and administer copyrights. We find people who love your songs, love you, want to work with you, and then do everything we can to ensure that you're paid for your work.
Mm-hmm. So, Cymba Music Publishing is a music publisher. Why don't we break down, I guess, just the general overview, because we'll get a bit more specific shortly, but what's the function of a music publishing firm like Cymba?
It's interesting. I mean, our function basically is to, support the writers that we sign, put them into put them into positions to win, basically at all costs. I think we'll talk a little bit more about it as we go along. But we do everything from, I guess you could say, we do everything from, set up co-writes, properly register the songs, look for people for you to collaborate with, and not just here in Canada. I mean, Cymba is well known as a global music publisher, just because you don't want to be on somebody's favorites list. You really want to make sure that you are basically understanding that the music industry is the world at large and not just what's in your backyard. um, there are different kinds of music publishers, Andrew, if I can just touch upon that.
Please.
um, Basically, there are major multinational companies like our friends at Warner Chappell, Sony, ATV, and Universal. There are other major level publishers that include companies like Peer and BMG Rights, and those aforementioned have offices or buy-in affiliations worldwide. There are also, rights companies that are popping up like Olay, who have really exploded onto the market in the last decade. And then there are independent publishers, and they make up the rest of the playing field. They have home offices in one location, or maybe depending on their successes, they have an office here in Los Angeles, for example, meaning Toronto or LA, or Toronto and London, or Vancouver and London. And they use sub-publishers who collect, administrate, and pitch their copyrights for a certain amount of time based on the terms of their contracts.
Right on. So again, I realize we're, I guess, taking on fairly complex topics, but just to give a general overview, what does a publishing contract generally look like, as far as like basic revenue splits or even a ballpark there, and kind of, what's expected of the writer or composer and of the publisher? And again, we'll get a bit more elaborate shortly, but just to kind of set the stage for the conversation.
Right. Well, first of all, there are different kinds of publishing contracts. A full publishing agreement where, the writer signs and assigns the right to the copyright based on the level of the deal that they've signed. If you have certain success and you want to co-own the copyright, obviously there's a co-publishing agreement. A sub-publishing agreement where you would get more of a handsome split. I mean, most co-publishing deals are no, sorry, most full publishing agreements are 50-50 splits.
Mm-hmm.
The sub-publishing agreements could be 75-25 across the board, which means that you would keep 75% and the publisher would retain 25% for usually a 3-year period, with a little bit of a retention period. Sorry, I'm getting bombed away here on my computers and other devices, so sorry for the mild distraction there. In addition, there are administration agreements, which is basically people who also do copyright administration. They just collect your money, and there are no creative services involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are single song agreements for those people who want to stay independent, but they want you to collect money for them. And we've specialized actually on the latter, in recent days, just because there are some people who are very nervous. It's a very unsure climate for people, working with music publishers and working with labels. So they want to protect themselves the best way they know how, and that's one of the ways that they do it.
Bang on. So yeah, basically partnering, as Vince just said there, but to pack it up, you're partnering with someone that's going to basically do the heavy lifting and trying to get your songs that you've written into other people's hands to be covered or sync licensed for use in media, or basically just taking that material and trying to get it into open opportunities to generate revenue that is then going to be shared between you, the writer, and the publisher that's basically making these connections and getting everything formalized and done so that you can sit back and focus on being creative. And we'll keep rolling here. So revenue, That's the big buzzword, and I guess kind of always has been in the music business, but especially now that a lot of pre-existing revenue streams are drying up or shifting, music publishing, there's still a lot of untapped potential here. And so let's break down. We've got a few of the different rights that a publisher can basically oversee and help you manage. Can you walk us through these different rights and, if you can, an example of ways that you can generate revenue that relate to each one?
Well, mechanical rights are, basically from the mechanical reproduction of your song. So if it is put on a CD, or if it is, it's basically manufactured through vinyl, those are two of the ways you can get your mechanical rights royalties. Public performance is being broadcast on radio or any other public transmission, like a live gig in a club, for example. A synchronization, when your music is synchronized or used in television, movies, and lately, one of the big boom areas is on the web, with new networks like Netflix or Amazon, that has a big television, network that is basically on their website. And
Right.
print rights is when you have a hit big enough, they print sheet music of it. Which is very interesting. I mean, certain territories of the world still use this significantly, and others are, selling it, different ways, whether it's through printed books or digitally.
Mhm.
And of course, the one thing that's not on here is streaming, which is the one that's, split in half between mechanical and performance as we go along.
And that's a hot button topic, and actually something that we've covered recently. Mike Rain's piece on music streaming and where the money goes. We'll throw that out in the handout section here. So yeah, I guess once again, I think I'm just going to play the role of summarizer, but print rights, as Vince said, the songbook. If you go to a music store and you buy the greatest Led Zeppelin riff collection to bring home and learn, there's your print rights. Sync rights is when your song is placed, as he said, in a commercial or video game, and you're entitled to some of the revenue for that. Public performance, radio, or played in business. And mechanical basically being, the most all-encompassing of those, if I can borrow the term. And I should say, too, we've got some great questions pouring in. I've got a feeling that this session's going to be really good for questions. And, Vince is here to help get you what you're specifically after. So in your interface with the GoToWebinar control panel, you can submit questions via text, and I'll be fielding those, and we'll put some in front of Vince very shortly, and more at the end. So please keep them coming. And yeah, so we gave a quick breakdown of the different rights that a publisher would manage and how those can turn into, dollar signs. But some of the other roles that a music publisher would undertake, and we've got a few checked off here. But Vince, love for you to weigh in.
Well, with copyright registration, we basically register your songs, with SOCAN or the like, or CMRRA. And all of that data gets collected in a pool and then gets sent out to our international representatives. I'm speaking as if you had a song or a catalog with Cymba. The ownership is based on the terms of the agreement that you've signed. And, if it's for the life of copyright, then we always have to keep in touch with you. If it's for a 3-year term, then we would do that and probably have a term of retention, which means we can collect money after the term has expired, because money may come in late from foreign territories. We shop songs to recording artists, and that's something that I've done a lot. Cymba, the name of my company, is an acronym for Crushing Your Music Business Apathy, because I decided to go global, and that's why you may have seen in my biography that my songs have been recorded in many languages, over a dozen, and it's mostly because I hate waiting for someone to return a phone call. I would much rather that if someone was going to say yes to it, I could move my career, or my writer's career, or my company's legacy forward by doing so. I own the most proactive, collaborative music publishing company. So arranging co-writes is second nature. And that's something that I've done not only for myself when I was signed to a major publisher, but something that we do religiously for our writers, which is trying to find a perfect match for the writer that we've signed, usually playing off their strengths and bringing someone in that will bring their strengths to the next level.
Mhm.
And with regards to copyright administration, I think we've kind of covered that, have we not?
I'm comfortable. Yeah, yeah. Just we've got the text overview
I
here.
mean, yeah, because with the administration part of things, we talked about earlier, with copyright administration, a lot of the administration outfits, as I said previously, they purely collect money for you. So if you've got a song and all you want to get is your money and give somebody the commission services percentage that they receive for taking care of your share of the song, that's what you would do. And those companies are basically, very well run, but they are a little bit more anonymous than working with a creative publisher such as us.
All right, on. Okay. So here we go. Questions, send them in, although I'm looking at some great ones here. And remember, if you've submitted a question and we don't get to it now, rest assured, we'll jump to it at the end of the session. And yeah, we'll make sure that everybody's looked after somehow. So here we go. First one here, how does a publisher fit into the relationship between an artist and a label if they've got some kind of recording agreement in place? Like I know some of the labels, for example, Universal Music Group would have Universal Music Publishing, but not all artists that are Universal artists are signed to the publishing arm. So yeah, how would an independent publisher fit into that equation?
Well, basically what they would do is they would attempt to find out how it is that they can work with the label in order to secure the things with their contacts that a publisher, that a label like Universal would not have. Because Universal in certain territories do use what I call the traditional format, which is you're signed to Universal Records, you should automatically sign with Universal Publishing. Um, I won't, let me just try and rephrase that. If you are assigned to label X and label X has a publisher, it does not mean that you should sign with label X's publishing department. What you should do is you should find out how you can best represent your songs, because in essence, the songs belong to you. So what I would do as the publisher is I would attempt to make a meeting. I would go there and make sure that I had my writers, present state and potential legacy in mind, find out how we can strategize not only writing here in Canada, writing in the United States, trying to send them internationally, and then trying to get the right people in the same room with them so that we can create something that is different and is clever and that is unique to enhance the record that is being made. It's a very good question, and I'm trying to answer it as diplomatically as possible.
All right, on. There are a lot of good questions here. In fact, yeah, this may be
Did
our
I answer that one, Andrew, though? Did I answer that one okay?
in my mind, let's see, we can hear from the original asker. If you'd like more information, please feel free to send a follow-up. But yeah, let's steamroll on here because there are a ton. What's the best way to find a network with music publishers to sub or co-sign? So for the agreements, like you mentioned, where it's not for the entire catalog, are there websites, contacts, contests, anywhere you can suggest for people looking to plug into that side?
You know, if you're doing it for the first time and you can make it to the conference that is in your province, or if you're coming to Canadian Music Week, that's a great way to find out a little bit more. I think on the web, you're going to know who the big players are just based on the reputations, whether you're a SOCAN member and you can see who's won a #1 award, Single song things are really tricky because usually the song has secured a cut or a recording, and that's the reason someone, if they specialize, would go after that type of deal. But I absolutely would source all the information, become a subscriber of FYI Music News, which is free. You're going to, educate yourself and see who you're going to compete with. Because if you have a single song or you do want to retain your catalog, one of the ways is to find out who specializes in that. Is it Olay? Is it a great company like Casablanca Media? Is it, are you one of those cool indie bands and there's a label like Arts and Crafts' publishing company good for you? Is it someone like us? I don't know. But the best way to find out is to, just even if you Googled Canadian music publishers, that's a great place to start.
Right on. And a public shout out to Alan Willert of the AFM/CFM, the Musicians Union, who often joins us here and just helps keep me in check, make sure that we're steering everything the right way. And he recommends, and it's a great bit of advice, that we're speaking specifically to the arrangement between the songwriter/composer and the publishing company, but by registering with all applicable organizations. So we're talking everything from AFM, SOCAN, Resound. Basically, you want to make sure that you've got all of your business in order to capitalize on all of your revenue streams under the various copyright laws and agreements. And there's some more questions there that we'll get to shortly. Here, let's take a couple more.
And just interject, Andrew, just interject, please don't forget MROC as well,
yes,
which is another great organization for your neighboring rights.
Bingo. And actually, yeah, Julia Train, MROC, just ran into her this weekend. You're absolutely right. Not by any means a comprehensive list, but a good bit of advice. Here, let's take a couple more, and remember, we'll jump to the rest of these at the end. A gentleman here says, I receive emails from various organizations looking for various styles of songs. They request a fee to consider your song. Are they legit?
No.
Easy. Maybe we can get to 3 questions then. Let's see. Sorry, great one. Here's a really good one. In the case of shopping songs to recording artists, so if you're a songwriter and you're looking for Tim McGraw or someone to cover your next big hit and make a lot of money, is it preferable if the songs that you're shopping, Vince, or that the songs a writer is shopping to publish companies like yours haven't been released? In other words, if the songwriter is also a recording artist, some of those songs, even if the recording artist, depending on their degree of popularity, if they've already been released, does that affect the potential for a song in your experience?
In many countries, it does. There are, a lot of notable exceptions. People have had, bigger hits or huge hits with, previously recorded songs. I mean, Ophelia Winter, recorded a song called "What a Girl Needs" that turned into "What a Girl Wants" for Christina Aguilera. I mean,
Right.
When I Was a Boy by Beyonce was a cover. Sometimes, if your song has been recorded and it is being pitched, you almost have to understand the business that you're getting into, because, in my own case, one of the writers that we represent, John Acosta, had a song he was going to put on his indie album on CD Baby while he performs in the United States, and we got some interest in the song in Japan. So I immediately said, I need you to take this off every service possible, or you're going to lose the cut. So we have seen it like that. I think it's based on how much you've done with the song individually in some cases. But as the world gets smaller and the A&R community is almost working, with smaller budgets, but in a parallel universe, I'd say if you're going to pitch the song, I would perform it if you're a performing songwriter, but I would be very, very careful about how much you expose it, because some people might turn away from it. I mean, years later they might come back to you and say, I want to cut it. and they'll just do that. But we found that most of the songs that we pitch have been previously unrecorded, and we offer full disclosure to all of our partners and their labels, excuse me, when we are submitting songs to them for what are called leads in our business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last one, and we'll carry on here. Thank you, everyone. And again, if we didn't touch on it yet, we will be back to you. This one just, to draw some clear lines in the sand here. I'm going to read this verbatim for clarity. If you're an artist who writes their own material but not a career songwriter, and you currently have a licensing agent, I think that's the key term here, a licensing agent who places your music in film and TV, what role does the publisher play? How are those things distinct?
What I would say is, I'm not sure if this is an independent artist. Andrew, should we assume at this point that this is an independent artist, or is this artist signed?
Oh, good question. Because I suppose you could have a third-party licensing agent, but that term just.
Well, let me be as general as I can. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah,
the bottom line is, if you're in the business, you're in business for yourself first. So you have to make sure that no matter if you're published by somebody, you have a writer account at SOCAN where you register your songs, check to make sure your songs are properly registered. If you represent the publisher share, then basically the agent that you have has a responsibility to let you know they have placed your master recording and that they should pass on the information for you to clear the synchronization of that song. So say, for example, you are your own publisher and they are representing your master. Well, those are two different rights. So they would clear the master because they're pitching your recordings.
Right.
And in turn, you would clear the synchronization of it. I would say read your contracts if you have an agent that represents you, and make sure you highlight everything in the agreement so that you understand what you're signing. And the other thing that I think is extremely important is that there are a lot of retitling agents who say, oh yeah, your song is called I'm Hanging Out with Andrew at the Bar, and that's your original title. And they'll say, well, why don't you just call it Andrew at the Bar, and let's do a 50-50 split on it, and you can keep your original copyright, but you'll basically make two copyrights. That's a terrible idea because you alienate anyone else who would want to work with it, and it's something that most legitimate publishers are very much against. I realize that some people feel the need to do that. However, I'm very much against it. So I hope that answers the question based on not knowing if the person is signed to a label, a production company, and or is an independent artist.
Okay, so I found out, and everything still applies, that the artist isn't signed to a formal label agreement. And actually, what you were just describing, I guess we know it, or I know it from the outside looking in, as renaming. But the process you just described of retitling, but changing the title of a song to, I guess, kind of circumvent certain agreements. And that was another question we had actually about your opinion on that. And like Vince said, the general industry consensus is that that's just a bad practice that can really mess things up on a lot of different ends. So let's roll here. This is great, by the way. We've got a lot more questions coming on. Vince, thank you for all of the advice and for rolling with us. But here we go. This was a question actually that a lot of people were asking, and I was just saying, give me a minute because it's coming up. What are you looking for from an artist or writer or basically anyone with whom you might strike up a business-related dialogue? What's your appetite?
I think if you are talking about me specifically, I would say that I'm looking for someone who is unique. I'll throw this out there. We're looking for an Ontario-based track person or someone who is a writer-producer. Basically, what we're looking for is someone who brings uniqueness, is clever, who knows how to communicate in a session with other songwriters. There are some people who prefer to write in solitude, and if that's you and your songs are amazing, then I would probably be interested. I think that the other thing that attracts me is a person who has a keen sense of themselves, most creatively and professionally, and who knows that to be goal oriented will make you a way better catch for a publisher if you are if you're interested. I mean, in the case of the artist or songwriter that we're looking for, an artist I'm looking for is someone who realizes that this is a 24/7 commitment. If you can't make the commitment, you may be better off being a songwriter. And if you are going to be that songwriter, you just have to know that on any given day, in order for a song to be recorded, as a publisher, the songs I deliver have to be better than everything that person at the other end has heard that day. So I would need you to be better than everybody on planet Earth that day when you're writing a song.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think that there are too many, there may be wannabe songwriters, and there may be people who think they are writers, but I remember the Quincy Jones keynote at CMW where he said that you have to keep always evolving and learning about the science of music. And I'm currently reading a book on an interview with a classical conductor, because I know nothing about classical music except that sometimes I really want to listen to it. So as an artist or a songwriter, how hard are you willing to work for yourself? Because that will rub off on any publisher. How professional are you? Do you show up on time? So this could also fold into what's expected of you as an artist or a songwriter. Do you understand, how important collaboration is if you're a pop songwriter, for example, or a country songwriter? Do you understand how fierce the level of competition is? So those are a couple of other things to think about. But if I sign you, just going back to what I said in the opening, Andrew, if I love you, I'm going to sign you. If I love what you do, if you do something uniquely, creatively different, if I think you can bring a different kind of equity to the company that I've basically built from scratch over the last 25 some odd years, if I think you're going to be the next Max Martin, who I've been lucky enough to work with, or if you're someone who just has such an unbelievable imagination, and you turn into the next great songwriter, I would want to be around you too. I think the expectations of an artist or a songwriter, outside of what I've mentioned, is that they understand that this is not a game. This is life. And if you are going to go out there and perform, you've got to go out there and you have to perform your songs as if they've never been performed better and will never be performed better by anybody else. Because when I have signed artists in my past life as an A&R person, I always felt that those people had those qualities. And as a songwriter, I've been lucky enough with my own writers that they listen to me and I listen to them, which is one of the ways as well that both parties ensure that a relationship succeeds. I mean, I've sat with the greatest writers in the world, and I've sat with a newbie who was shaking like a leaf, and to me there's no difference, because everyone started somewhere to get somewhere, and I'm still trying desperately to write a song myself that peaks beyond number 11 on the Canadian top 50 songs. So I think the expectations of a writer that I would have is just that they would understand that, you know, it is a business. And I think a lot of people are thinking of their backyard being the biggest place that they can have a hit record. And to me, my backyard, you know, is the over 125 countries that music gets distributed to. So if you know, you might end up starting somewhere else. You might end up being a big hit artist in Canada. You know, Andrew, I think one of the hardest things to be is a hit songwriter here at home. And, you know, what I look for is a relationship with this artist that has attracted me to want to work with them, where the expectations and the goals are shared, and that at the end of the day, we can look at everything from royalty statements to opportunities to chart numbers and to awards to show that we work together because we had one common mission that we worked on together. And that's the relationship I've shared with one of my writers, Davra Vulama, who's based in Vancouver, has been with me for 16 years. Eileen Dela Cruz has been with me for 11. And, you know, it just gives you an example. And in some ways, developing a writer from the beginning has been my greatest joy. If I see something, I'm going to jump on it. Others are different. They may want you to be a recording artist who has 2 or 3 albums. You know, they know that you've been to Nashville on your own 5 or 6 times, and they know you've got either a little bit of revenue out there or a lot of revenue, and they see something where they can basically put a foot to the gas pedal, and they feel they can get you to the next level. And we've seen that a lot as well. I mean, us working with Dennis Ellsworth, for example, is extremely important because he gives us something we don't have in our genre-specific categories. He's flexible as a creative person. He tours. He's not anywhere near reaching his potential, and he has as much fun as anyone I've ever met being in a session. That's the kind of person I'm looking for.
All right on. Yeah, no, I can speak from experience just to offer some examples because, yeah, not everyone, well, you mentioned Max Martin, and for anyone that doesn't know who that is, if you throw him into Google, you're pretty much looking at a list of the biggest pop songs from the last 15, 20 years, just pure gold. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions about co-writing, which we'll get to shortly, but got one more slide here, and then, yeah, we can dive in. There's plenty of good ones here. So we were talking a bit about your side of the arrangement here, but speaking for the songwriters, the artists themselves, what should, and you did touch on this in a large part there, but how do you know, how can a songwriter ensure that their contract, that their publisher is living up to the agreement? Question about sharks in the water here. Yeah, I would love to hear a bit about, what the artist should be thinking from their perspective.
If you sign a publishing agreement, the one thing that you have to know is that with some publishers, they're not really obligated to do anything. So your relationship, they're obligated to register your songs and to chase opportunities, but, how you would know you're being properly represented. Did you do the homework that I mentioned that you should do before you approach the publisher? When you're working with a publisher, you're in business for yourself. So let's say, if we have, John Smith signs with publisher L. Well, what does publisher L do? What do they specialize in? If you're an urban hip-hop writer, why are you signing with publisher L, who's a country writer, and then having expectations of them because they took a flyer on you, but they're going to fail you because they don't work in the genre that you specialize in? Do they know, how do you know you're being properly represented? I mean, are you seeing a follow through on the commitments that you've made with each other? Do you have goals? In 1 year you want to be here, 3 years you want to be here, 5 years you want to be there. So if you don't know what your own goals are, then you can't really judge if you're being properly represented by a publisher. I also believe that because I keep preaching that you are in business for yourself, how much networking are you doing? I mean, networking is everything if you're a songwriter. You might be the lead singer of an amazing rock band. You've got a great local audience. You get 200 or 300 people out to all of your shows. People are buying your merch off the stage, but you don't have that hit song. Well, if you're networking with the other bands or other writers, or your publisher is putting you together with somebody and you end up having that hit, that's one way that you know that you're properly representing yourself and that they are working in tandem with you. Um, I also think that you have to know what your royalty statements are if you are at that level, and you have to make sure that the cue sheets are going in. If you have songs that are being put in film and television, or in other ways that your music is being exploited. I mean, there's a in my own personal case, what's your communication like? Can you get your publisher on the phone? Do they respond to emails? Do your representatives take what you say to heart? How often are you going in and playing music for them? How often do they allow you to do it? It's kind of like a mishmash of questions. Um, do you think we've covered that, Andrew? Is there anything else you wanted to, is there a question that we have that asks something specific for that, or do you want me to move on to the sharks?
We've got, actually, there was one question that just came up. No, it's not too specific to that. We can keep going. Sharks in the water, question mark.
They're everywhere, I guess. The sharks in the water is basically based, in my opinion, on maybe a person's naivete. There are independent producers who will charge you $5,000 to record a song, and they don't deliver what you're looking for despite the specifics you've asked them for. You have to do your research as an independent artist, making sure that the studio that you work out of, if you are working at someone's studio, is providing you with the materials that you are really paying for. There are a ton of sharks in the sync world right now who would offer to pitch your songs, and sometimes you are assigning rights that you really shouldn't. So you have to make sure that you read everything, and even myself, being in the business as long as I have, there are things that I don't understand that I have to reach out to a lawyer or ask a representative at SOCAN about, or ask a representative at one of the other bodies, whether it's a provincial body that can basically assist you. I cannot endorse enough, if you're calling from British Columbia or Prince Edward Island, joining Music BC or Music PEI, Music Yukon, or any of the other provincial organizations from Alberta to Ontario. They are there to help you, and they can keep you out of the next thing we'll talk about, which is disputes. If you co-write a song with somebody, grab a split sheet from the web, make sure both people sign it so that suddenly you're not co-writing with 7 people instead of 1. With disputes themselves, you can always tell a writer by the company they keep. And I'm paraphrasing, something from many years ago. But I think if you're dealing with professionals, your disputes will be limited. If you're sampling a record because you're in that genre of music, or if you're sampling something, you have to expect to compensate the people you're working with, and you can stay out of the dispute pool. I think if you deal with honesty and trust for the most part, 90% of the situations that you would get involved with could potentially, hold off any potential dispute. The other 10%, if you're not sure about someone you're working with, ask somebody, because word of mouth drives the business from the beginning to the highest success. Da-da-da-da-da. Do we have a question, Andrew?
Yeah, we've got a few. The one that seems to be most common, and maybe we can just answer it now, um, is how does someone, you've described what someone in your position is looking for. How do you recommend someone go about contacting you or your peers in the industry, other publishers, if they feel that they do indeed have what you're after?
Well, you should, basically, if you can email them a link, make sure that you have all your contact information on it. If you had met the person before, tell the person where you've met them. Um, Ask them if they are interested before littering their inbox with, 15 songs. If you have a little baby business plan for what you want to do. If you're a songwriter, you could say, I'm Terry Collins. I'm a songwriter. I'm based in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. I've been writing for 3 years. I'd like to send you a couple songs for your consideration. And others may not take solicited material. You may never hear from them. However, the truth in the business is the people that you are dealing with are unbelievably busy, and you should respect their time before you press send. Um, if you want to mail someone a package, make sure, like I said, there's information, there's a biography inside, if possible. If you've been previously recorded before, or you've been locally nominated for any kind of award, or you're a member of the Songwriters Association, let people know, what your experience is, and also why you could make a difference to the company that you're submitting your music to.
Okay, so yeah, let's jump into the co-writing question and, well, things around it. First off, can you clarify exclusive rights versus the alternative to any composition? Can you give us a clear definition?
From a publisher, like on my end, if I exclusively, well, basically any agreement that I sign for the song or the catalogs that I'm representing, I would want to represent those exclusively for the territory that I would represent your songs. For example, with writer A with us, they've signed a publishing deal. We would represent their songs worldwide for the life of the copyright. And if they are an independent writer that have done their own thing for a long time, but they want to get their songs out there, they might sign a sub-publishing deal, which will allow us, for the territory that they allow us to represent their songs in, they would allow us to do that for a 3-year term and a retention period. So that way, if we get any success for them after the term is expired, we'd get a chance to, bring that money in for both of us and our mutual benefit. Did that answer the question?
Totally, yeah. So I'm just going through there. There's a ton of questions here. This is great, and I want to clump them all
Well,
together.
Andrew, I'll stay here as long as you need me to, so it's not a problem.
Okay, I was gonna say I think I'd ask for an hour of your time. We'll keep trudging along here. Yeah, our friend Byron. Hey Byron, thanks for joining us here. Who works in entertainment law? But says one thing that you might want to cover is ensuring that if you are writing with someone in a co-write, whether it's a bandmate or a friend, that you clarify who controls the composition, because people can assume that they control a full composition when that may not be the case. And I don't know, is that something that has ever gotten muddy on your end, or maybe a secondhand story that you've heard?
Well, I think if you have a three-way co-write with three different writers who are published by three different entities, the writers would sign up on a split sheet and they would control their own publisher share. I think if you're writing for a specific band, perhaps in maybe Byron is mentioning it in that regard, you know, basically honor the relationship that you have and keep those songs on hold until the band has decided whether or not they want to record them or not. I would not necessarily. I've never heard about one person controlling the the composition in such a way. That's very unique to me, but I think it might be because we work in a co-writing and collaborative way that has been really unique to the Canadian market for many, many years, because we do so much collaboration that there's an understanding before you go in. So maybe to Byron's point, if you know that you're going in to write for the for, you know, Generation Q or whatever your band is called, you know, maybe they can even put a piece of paper together and say, you know, until the end of the year, these songs are for Generation Q, and let's leave them there. And if they need someone to, you know, put their pen to paper, that might be a way to do it. But I have not heard that situation in a long time.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Do songwriters more, and I guess that you can only answer this from a first person perspective, but do songwriters seek you out more? Like, do you get pitches constantly, or like, are you always on the look for songwriters? Or I'm sure it's a hybrid of the two somehow, but yeah, I would love to hear a bit about, I guess, who's being more proactive in a lot of these situations.
It's 50-50. I think sometimes, you know, I have a couple writers that have kept in touch with me for 3 or 4 years, and um, I don't even sign them, but I like them as people. They always carry themselves professionally, and you know, I'm happy to help them. We're always looking for new talent because if your company doesn't evolve, people will only come to you for the same thing or what they perceive you can give them.
Hmm.
You know, so it really does depend. I mean, I think that the on a day-to-day basis, we are getting submissions, and what might surprise the people who joined us on the webcast today or on this webinar is that we get 90% of our submissions from the United States, which is really hilarious because I'm, you know, constantly asking people on the street, you know, or people that we know, or, you know, lawyers, managers, and what have you. You got anybody for us to look at? And so many submissions. You know, the latest submission I got was from Finland yesterday.
Hmm.
So the world is a lot smaller, and you know, sometimes people aren't ready to do the hustle, but sometimes they just reach us right on time. So
Right.
that I hope that answers the question. We've also found 3 or 4 of our writers through the Songwriters Association of Canada Songworks program that I was the chief producer of for 7 years, and it was a great way for me to kind of get into the domestic fabric of songwriters and artists that write songs.
Oh, right on. And yeah, to the point earlier about the co-writes and just making sure that ownership is all clear. This is a piece of advice we could probably give in every webinar, but a band agreement can assist with that and cover you for so many other things. If you're in a band and starting to get serious, yeah, please consider that. Okay, let's bang some of these up here. I'm getting a bit technical, but should songwriters expect or ask for a reversion clause in single song or other publishing deals? And actually, I asked that one mostly to get a quick definition of a reversion clause.
Well, basically, if you have a single song agreement and you have a termination date, which is usually 3 years after you signed it, then your reversion clause is right there. If you sign a long-term agreement, then you know, you should have a reversion clause if you believe that it is your right, and it's your right to exercise it if you have one. Some publishers will give you one, some publishers will not give you one.
Okay. Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about releasing material. So it's a specific case study, but a good question. So our gentleman here wrote and recorded an alt country duet that he always felt could be of interest to publishing companies and other recording artists. However, he released the song himself and has received some media attention and won an international songwriting competition award. That said, he's a small-time artist, and if he wanted to pitch the song to publishing companies aggressively, what should he do next? Should he consider removing the song from iTunes and other distribution platforms? Any advice?
Yeah, I'm going to throw you a 97-mile-an-hour fastball. The first thing you should do is re-demo it as a solo song.
Oh,
If the lyrics can apply to it being a solo performance rather than a duet, which are painfully difficult to pitch as a publisher, that might be the best way to start it.
bam. Okay. This is an interesting one. How is
Wasn't expecting that one.
no, I think that's probably helpful. There you are. How has the market appetite for remixes affected music publishing, if at all?
It depends what the definition of remix means, because remix is a horribly abused and misused term in the industry. Are we talking about cover versions and remakes? Because remixes were first basically popularized in the 1970s in the disco world. That's where the word really came into prominence. Of course, if a person had a song recorded on an album, they would remix it or re-enhance the sound. But the problem that I find is that, if you listen to a Will Smith song and they've used a sample of Sister Sledge, the contemporary writer calls that a remix. It's not. It's basically a cover version that interpolates a sample.
Sure.
So it's very, very hard to answer the question because it depends what that individual person who submitted the question believes a remix, what they understand a remix to be.
Well, then, I think I can infer, just based on public appetite, that he would be meaning remix as in taking the original stems, particularly vocal hooks and maybe other tracks, and yeah, remixing it with a different beat or maybe slightly different melody where you would recognize the song, but obviously it is a unique take on it that a third party has done.
Basically, they would, remixes like that were done to enhance the original copyright. And the people who would do the remixes would get paid a fee by the master rights owner, but they would not end up being part of the copyright or get a piece of the writer's share or the publishing unless it's been previously negotiated or they basically been solicited to do so, or they have been, or they've done it and it's blown up on the web because acapellas are far more readily available than they used to be. And the master rights owner and the copyright owner has come to them and said they wanted to buy it. I mean that during my days at BMG and RCA, and when I've had my independent label when I was younger, I commissioned thousands or hundreds of remixes. Shouldn't say thousands, hundreds of remixes, over 250 mixes. And I believe we only gave a royalty point to one person, and it was not a very popular conversation. But those were days of days in the past, and you may be able to renegotiate something different today, or negotiate something different today.
Okay, I've got 4 questions left in the queue. We have been kicking some butt here. So again, huge thanks, Vince, and that's from me and about a dozen people whose questions you've answered, or ones whose question you didn't answer that are very happy with the advice you're getting. Here's one. Is a blanketed Canadian copyright form safe? And by that he means if someone registers one form for 12 songs made entitled Summer 2017 Songs, does that basically cover for a copyright that would be, I don't know, administratable on your end?
I'm very confused by the question, but what I would promise to do is if you send me the question, I will make sure that it gets answered because I'm sorry, but I do not understand the question.
Okay, there you go. I was reading verbatim. So, yeah, Joseph, one copyright form for 12 songs is the follow up. Like,
A copy, yeah. Uh, hmm.
oh, here we go. He's referring to registering with the CIPO. Would I be right that that's the
Oh,
Canadian Intellectual Property Organization?
organization, right? Why don't you just, I mean, for myself, I think registering the songs with SOCAN has always sufficed, or getting your music and mailing it to yourself and keeping it sealed.
Okay.
I
I see. Thanks a bunch, Byron, again, our friend from Edwards PC Creative Law, helping me out big time. But yeah, he's wondering, like, to save money, if he registers 12 songs on one form, is he covered? I think that was it. So actually, maybe I think
okay.
Byron's taking that one over. Thank you, Joseph. And here, Irpa's wondering, you mentioned, are there events or opportunities, like major industry gatherings, where people can come and put their music in front of a number of publishers for consideration?
The Songwriters Association does a date with a demo. They've done it across the country, or in certain locales. That's one I know of. Um, you know, to be honest with you, because of the level of writer that I usually deal with, we usually they get in contact with us, or they don't wait for a conference, or they will give it to us at Canadian Music Week or something of the like. Um, Sometimes it just depends. I mean, in a way, I make it sound like publishers are very, very hard to reach, but um, to be honest with you, at when I did Nova Scotia Music Week, we had there were a lot of students there who were talking to me in depth about the music that they make. So I'd say that first and foremost, the provincial events, depending on where you live, are probably the best places to start
Okay, yeah, to the point
because
of oh,
publishers do come there.
sorry to interrupt, a bit of a lag. Gotta love technology. Yeah, more advice to copyright. Byron, more advice. People think you need to register with CIPO in order to get copyright, but it's not something that triggers copyright protection. It does create a presumption that you own the copyright, but you can gain copyright protection by fixing something, namely writing the song or recording it. Again, Edwards PC Creative Law. And a little plug, there are publishers coming to Ottawa for Megaphono February 1st to 3rd. Thank you very much.
If we're invited.
Well, maybe that was a formal invitation. Okay, here we go. Just two more, and they are specific to your side of the business. What are the first steps that a new small publishing company should take to get set up?
Can you ask me that question once more, please? I'm sorry, I had a dropout here.
Yeah, any advice for a small publishing company that's looking to get off the ground? What are the first steps to get going?
Um, what I would say is, how would I start if I was starting tomorrow? First thing I would do is I would have a good lawyer. I would make sure that I had a contract that I was confident in using to sign the writers that I want to pursue. I would make sure that I absolutely positively loved the writer I was going to sign or the songs that I wanted to represent. And I would work the contacts that I have and reach out to people who are in the publishing industry that are willing to have a conversation about, you know, what they would see as something missing in the industry. Because if you do something unique, you're going to create a name for yourself within the publishing world that's different. You know, there's terrific publishers in Atlantic Canada who do something completely different than I do, or on the West Coast where they would basically look at being publishers specifically for film composers. So try and find a place in the marketplace where you can represent the most creative, unique people you can find and have the proper infrastructure to support those people if the success comes.
Outstanding. Huge thanks to Vince Degiorgio for joining us. Cymba Music Publishing, easy to find on the web. Thanks to everyone that came out. Bled a little over our hour, but that a lot of people are telling me that they do not mind at all. Many comments thanking for the advice. Also, thank you to Byron Pascoe, Edwards PC Creative Law. Thanks to Alan, Secretary and Treasurer of the AFM, American Federation of Musicians. And I should bear that if you are a member of AFM, they will basically help administer various rights and make sure that if the song's registered with them, you are getting paid. We mentioned MROC, SOCAN, Resound. There are many I'm forgetting, Sodrac, CMRRA, a ton of alphabet soup. And here we go. The thanks are coming in. Thanks, great webinar. Thank you, Byron, for Got Sound Exchange. And yeah, I think that does us here.
Don't forget the Songwriters Association of Canada as well.
SAC. Next webinar, it's going to be Thursday, February 23rd, I believe is the date. Creating a killer website for musicians. Dave Kuhl from Bandzoogle is joining us. nwcwebinars.com is where you can go for all of the information. You can access all of our previous sessions, including this one, which will be up in about 24 hours. Again, nwcwebinars.com. musicbooksplus.com/publish. Here are a selection of some titles that our team has chosen. And Vince, did you have any that you'd recommend for people looking to get a bit more understanding on the topic?
Actually, a little left of center for the creators, songwriters on songwriting by Paul Zollo is a Bible of mine. He just put together another new edition of it. I strongly recommend it. I just finished a book called The B-Side, which is The Death of Tin Pan Alley and the Rebirth of the Great American Song by Ben Yagoda, which tells you about the originating of ASCAP and BMI in the United States. And it was a great history lesson for me for, a person who is, obsessed with songs. And there are a couple of others. I'm about to read the Antonio Carlos Jobim biography, but the B-Side is the most recent one. And I mentioned that I'm diving headfirst into trying to understand classical music for the fun of it. And Haruki Murakami's new book, Absolutely on Music, where he interviews Seiji Ozawa, who is was the conductor of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra in the 80s and who's been the lead conductor for the Boston Symphony Orchestra for the last 28 years, is something else that I just want to learn about things that I haven't taken the time to learn as well, Andrew, and the book by Norman Granz, who also helped create the Verve record label, is something that I like. And a lot of people seem to like the Todd Braybeck book on publishing, which everything you ever wanted to know about the music business. Is that what it's called? Because
Yeah,
I have it downstairs.
The Braybeck brothers. Yeah.
But those are the ones that I like.
Excellent. So again, thank you for joining us. If you were here, you'll be getting an email to the address you used to register with a link to this full recording. Feel free to share, pass along. Of course, you can send us follow-up questions. I'm easy to find. Again, I'm Andrew King, Canadian musician. That was Vince Degiorgio, Cymba Music Publishing. And we're done here. Join us again February 23rd, nwcwebinars.com for everything.